Stories you care about. News Talk 1330 WLBB, Carrollton.
Good morning. Welcome to the Community Voice. I'm Steve Gradick, your host. Delighted to have you with us on this beautiful Monday morning. It's a whole nother week and a whole nother adventure to see what will blow up this week. Anyway, Joey Garland is in studio. He's a very special guest. This is a man of many talents. We're here, however, to talk to him in his law enforcement capacity. But just as a point of information, which we won't go into, he has a production company. He has a championship wrestling academy. He's a musician, and the list goes on and on. But today we're here to talk to Joey about a proposed program called Cop Talk. And Joey's history in law enforcement is, we'll say he's a graduate of Thomas University in criminal justice. Graduated Georgia Peace Officers Academy with honors, and a graduate of Southern States Police Dog Academy. He's worked with the Douglas County Sheriff's Office for many, many years, beginning in 1988. He's worked in the corrections rank as a sergeant with a SWAT K-9 Special Investigations Division. He's worked full service with the K-9 Division assigned to patrol, worked as a senior deputy on patrol, and an investigator with the Fugitive Division. So good morning, Joey.
Good morning. Good morning.
Thank you for coming in. We want to do something a little different for me. This program is really to answer those questions about law enforcement and crime and police that maybe don't actually get answered that directly in other realms. And we're hoping that you can kind of shed some light on these things.
I hope we can.
You good for it?
I'm good. Yeah.
Of course, you can call us, 678-601-TALK, 678-601-8255. And we're going to be on, we are on Facebook Live, the News Talk 1330 Facebook page, so you can post your questions there. So with that, let's get started. We just heard about another police ambush shooting in Sacramento over the weekend. A rookie cop was killed tragically. Bring us up to date on the right perspective. I understand you have some figures regarding there's about an increase, a continued increase in the number of police officers that are fatally shot.
Yes, Steve. The FBI statistics for 2016, there was a total of 118 officers that were killed in the line of duty, of which 66 were killed intentionally. And that's a significant increase from 2015. Those numbers have rose in 2017 and 2018. Last year alone, 17 officers were killed while ambushed, and that's just a scary number to me. The number of threats toward law enforcement has increased dramatically. And to answer your question, I think law enforcement is just responding to an increase in crime. The media has put so much attention on law enforcement involved shootings, fueling the activist groups who in turn encourage the public to hate police. Threats by organized gangs toward police have risen dramatically. Now, the part of the study you mentioned states that police are fatally shooting people at twice the rate, according to that FBI study. The fatal part, I would say, is because of law enforcement in today's world has to go through much more intense training, and rightly so. So I think a number of the officer-involved shootings, they're a little more accurate, which is a good thing. We have to stay a step ahead, or else the number of officer deaths would increase.
You use the term You say here about last year, 17 officers were killed while ambushed. How do you define ambush? What does that really mean?
Well, they classify ambush in a couple of different ways. It was a few years back, a couple of New York City police officers were just sitting in their car.
I remember that.
Yeah, so, and that was gang members that just came up to their cruiser, whether they were sitting there doing paperwork or sitting there doing surveillance, whatever they were doing, and just by surprise they were ambushed. And then the ones like the one we just had over the weekend in Sacramento, they were responding to a domestic call, and the subject of the investigation was just pretty much prepared and waiting on them. And when they approached the house or the apartment, they just opened fire on them.
They said that he had cameras set up, so he saw them come and he knew exactly where they were.
Right, and I would say in roughly my 32 years of service, cameras on residents or apartments or just in the community in general were pretty rare. Mm-hmm. Now it's rare to not find one. Mm-hmm. I mean, there's cameras everywhere now.
Okay, let's move on. One of the big issues has been over the years is about when can a law enforcement officer enter a private residence to apprehend a wanted person without a search warrant. We think about civil liberties and rights, and so that's a big question. So what's the answer to that?
Well, in Payton versus New York, the court set out an inquiry before police may enter a private residence to execute a warrant. First, they must possess a reasonable belief that in the residence or the residence is the suspect's dwelling, being the address listed on the warrant or the address of record. And second, they must have a reason to believe that the suspect is within that dwelling or that residence that can be determined by surveillance, intelligence, or even in pursuit. If they are, in some cases, if patrol officers try to stop this person and he runs because he's wanted, and he bails out of the car, what we call in the business a bush bond, and he ends up running to a friend's house, and they have knowledge that he ran into that friend's house, then of course that gives them the right to pursue.
So if they have that knowledge, they can virtually go anywhere to apprehend that
That's
suspect.
correct. That's correct.
What in the world? Of course, we hear the stories like if they're doing that, sometimes they go into the wrong house or they get the wrong address. I think there was a case like that in Gwinnett. I mean, that happens.
It does. It's rare, but I'm going to tell you something. It might be a surprise to you. Us law enforcement people are human. So mistakes do happen.
You're not supposed to be.
I understand. Yeah, mistakes do happen. With our training and everything that we do to try to make sure that all the T's are crossed and I's are dotted, no matter how much intelligence or preparation you can do, mistakes do happen. And in most cases like that, it happens in more chaotic situations when there's not as much time to prepare.
Tell what in the world is a no-knock warrant?
A no-knock warrant is usually a phrase used in search warrants. Now, all arrest warrants, if you have an arrest warrant for a person, a wanted fugitive, those are all no-knock, if needed to be. And kind of explain that, and I'll get back to what you're asking. But on an arrest warrant, if a person's in that dwelling, or like I say, they have knowledge in that dwelling, there's always an opportunity for that person, if you knock on the door, for that person to come to the door and try to handle things in an easy way. But if they don't, then all arrest warrants gives you the provision of a no-knock, because you have the authority to apprehend. And of course, there's some cases that are high-risk warrants where it may be unsafe to knock, and the element of surprise is needed. So therefore, you might not knock on the door at that time. But a no-knock's mainly used in search warrants. And they are done in a lot in drug related investigations to where or situations where there's safety or evidentiary items involved that you need that element of surprise so that when the judge signs that search warrant, you get a no-knock provision.
Don't you and other law enforcement officers, you knock down somebody's door and you go in and you're yelling, I guess, police and stand down or whatever. Aren't you concerned that the resident inside may just simply see that as a home invasion and return fire or start shooting?
Sure. And that's even a more of concern today than it was 10 or 20 years ago. That's why we like to make sure that we are marked up, plenty of identifiers on our attire to identify us as law enforcement. We always announce law enforcement. And if there's a way, when I'm conducting my investigations, that's kind of the last thing I want to do is a no-knock breach. I would prefer to give anybody, it's a double-edged sword. It depends on the case. There's some cases that no, I don't want them to know I'm coming because I know without a doubt that it's going to be problems. And if I don't have that element of surprise, I'm just setting ourselves up for a showdown that we may not want. So in a fugitive investigation, there's even times where to avoid that type of situation, I'll choose to make the apprehension out on the road or in a public place and not do a residence just to avoid that type of problem.
Our guest this morning is Joey Garland with the Douglas County Sheriff's Office. He's developing a program called Cop Talk, and we'd love to have your phone call, 678-601-TALK. Any questions for Joey, or we're on Facebook Live, and you can post your questions there. Lee Powers just posted. Just wanted to say thank you for your service. And we'll be back with more after this word from Tanner Health System.
At Tanner, we're advancing health throughout West Georgia and East Alabama because we know that exceptional care isn't based on how many patients we serve, but how well we serve them. That's why we're focused on quality, delivering the best possible care for our patients. It's why we're expanding our clinical services and building new facilities to serve our growing community. And it's why we're looking beyond our hospitals and medical practices to develop sustainable wellness and preventive health programs in our region. What makes a hospital great has changed. It's not how many beds we have. It's how well we care for the neighbors who need them. Delivering the right care to every patient, every time, is how Tanner is advancing health with medicine beyond measure. Learn more at tanner.org or find a physician on our medical staff by calling 770-214-CARE.
Good morning. Welcome back to the Community Voice. I'm Steve Graddick, your host on this beautiful Monday morning. Joey Garland's in studio with the Douglas County Sheriff's Office, an investigator, a lifetime of service in the Sheriff's Office there. And we're talking law enforcement questions. We'd love to have you call, 678-601-TALK, 678-601-8255, or you can post your questions on the News Talk 1330 Facebook Live. And we've been talking about no-knock warrants, apprehending a wanted person within a private residence. There's one other associated question with this is, you go in, I'm talking like I know what I'm talking about. I really don't. But anyway,
you do.
Yeah, you go in to serve a warrant to the situation, and you got the mother, you got the daughter, you got the brother-in-law, and they're in your face telling you, get out, you don't know what you're talking about, and big, and so in the back ain't of interest to you. How do you handle people who are providing shelter or transportation or trying to avoid the apprehension of the one that you've got the warrant for?
Well, this is something I run into every day. we hear all the time when we go to try to apprehend a fugitive, and they say, you can't come in my house, you don't have a search warrant, blah blah blah. So what very rarely do I or my colleagues ever arrest a family member or charge a family member for, and what you're referring to is hindering the apprehension, apprehension of a fugitive. Rarely we charge anybody with that. I understand a mother's love. Nothing is stronger than a mother's love, and generally we just don't charge people with that unless they just don't really give us a choice. Now, when I go to a residence and we tell the family members, whatever, that we're looking for their brother or their son or whatever it may be, at that point, most of the time they already knew they were wanted, had outstanding warrants anyway. But at that point, we tell them, okay, give us a call if you see them, whatever. And I also give them this hindering the apprehension law. I make sure they're aware of it. I tell them
what
it's
is
about.
that? What's the potential penalty for
hindering
and apprehension of a fugitive?
It's 1 to 5, 1 to 5 years for that. It's if they make kind of an overt act, then we'll charge, or if they're not cooperative. If they're not cooperative and they pretty much, from the beginning tell us to go fly a kite, and then they do all these different acts to aid and abet this fugitive from being apprehended. And after we've had this conversation, and what really puts it over the threshold, when they aid and abet that family member, and it aids them in a way that it puts us in any sort of danger, at that point, yes, they gonna get charged.
I imagine they don't tell you to go fly a kite. It's a little more colorful than that.
Oh yeah, always much more colorful.
How do you take that? Let's just call it verbal abuse. How do you deal with that?
I can think back being a rookie in my first few years. Oh man, it would get under my skin. And it'd be like, how dare they, talk and disrespect. But now it rolls off like water on a duck's back.
Really?
I almost look at it. It's like it's the role they're going to play. It's almost like theater.
Let's see if I can. Let's see this one. Okay, big speaker. We didn't really go over the phone call protocol before this. This one. Okay.
We'll make it work.
All right. Are you there? Good morning. Oh, okay. Okay, here we go. All right. Good morning. You're on the Community Voice.
Good morning. How are you?
Good. How are you?
Seen pretty good better days. I was wanting to ask Joey a question. I believe I used to work with him.
Okay, go ahead.
Joey, this is Glenn. I don't know if you remember me. I was back there when Earl Lee was there, back in the late 80s, early 90s.
Okay.
Simmons. Yes, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, we got you. Go ahead.
All right. I was there back in the late 80s, early 90s when Earl Lee was there. Do you remember me?
I'm trying to, buddy. I know several Glens, so.
Yeah. With as crazy as the world has gotten nowadays and more intense the job is, how do y'all cut the line down to where it is actually when somebody's threatening someone?
You mean against law enforcement or person to person?
For threats to law enforcement or for person to person?
Either way, really. Because I see all these Facebook posts nowadays, and and people seem to be lost their mind.
Yeah, no, I get what you're saying. There's, terroristic threats. I'm sure you're familiar. Terroristic threats. What constitutes that? Unfortunately, and on Facebook, a lot of those posts are in fact terroristic threats. But it's so much on Facebook. You would about need a whole division or a whole department could sit there and police Facebook all day long.
Yeah.
But I have a lot of people call me and say my ex-boyfriend or just this person I'm talking to on Facebook has made these threats, and 90% of the time it's hot air and
Oh yeah.
But as far as the law is concerned, what they've said on Facebook would constitute terroristic threats, and it's an illegal statement.
Yeah.
But I have to do Facebook, unfortunately. But it's the ghetto of social media as far as I'm concerned.
Yes. I just want to say good morning to you and thank you for your service, and all of you that's still in law enforcement. Continue to keep us all safe, and thank you.
Well, thank you, buddy. Good to hear from you. I think I just remembered who you was.
Yeah, Betty Simmons down at Rock Inn Cafe was my mother, if that helps you out any.
Yeah, it does. Well, good to hear from you, buddy. And
You too, buddy.
we could use you back.
Have a good one, buddy.
All right, man.
Thanks for calling. Bye-bye. Okay, well, let's take another break, and we've got more with Joey Garland on Cop Talk, if you will. But first, this word from Tanner Health System.
At Tanner, we're advancing health throughout West Georgia and East Alabama because we know that exceptional care isn't based on how many patients we serve, but how well we serve them. That's why we're focused on quality, delivering the best possible care for our patients. It's why we're expanding our clinical services and building new facilities to serve our growing community. And it's why we're looking beyond our hospitals and medical practices to develop sustainable wellness and preventive health programs in our region. What makes a hospital great has changed. It's not how many beds we have. It's how well we care for the neighbors who need them. Delivering the right care to every patient, every time, is how Tanner is advancing health with medicine beyond measure. Learn more at tanner.org or find a physician on our medical staff by calling 770-214-CARE.
Good morning. Welcome back to the Community Voice. I'm Steve Braddock, your host. On a beautiful Monday morning, Joey Garland is our guest with the Douglas County Sheriff's Office, and we're talking all things law enforcement. You can give us a call, 678-601-TALK, or find us on Facebook Live and post a question there. One question that I've always found kind of interesting, never really been clear on it, is the difference between a police officer and that of a deputy sheriff in their different roles and or jurisdictions. In other words, just to kind of address that, if you would.
Well, Steve, the main difference is basically the duties that the sheriff's office and police departments carry out and the jurisdiction surrounding those duties. A sheriff is mainly responsible, he's constitutionally responsible for maintaining a jail, executing warrants, and serving civil papers. To do those things, deputy sheriff, or as far as the executing warrants and extraditions, I meant to mention extraditions as one of the duties as well. They have statewide powers when it comes to executing warrants. Deputy sheriff can go in any county in the state of Georgia. Now, generally, they would, if they're going to do that, they would call that department in that other county as a courtesy and let them know they're there. But a lot of the counties will work together on those kind of things if it's a big enough, high-profile case. But a police officer, on the other hand, a police officer doesn't have the authority to necessarily go into other counties and execute warrants.
Okay.
So that would be somewhat of a difference. Now, they can go into other counties and say investigate a homicide, they can do that all day long. They generally would get with another agency in that other county. But it's common, especially in fugitive investigations, for a sheriff's office to go into other counties. So that's one of the main differences. A deputy sheriff also doesn't generally make traffic stops in other counties or anything like that, but they certainly could if they have the authority to. If they needed to, but that's not a general practice.
So when we see a law enforcement officer or a deputy sheriff from another county traveling through Carroll County, technically they could stop and work a traffic accident or something?
Not work a traffic accident,
but they can.
But if they saw, let's say, let's give an example. Say they see a reckless driver that's
or DUI or whatever,
that's ran somebody off the road, or
they
DUI.
Can go get them.
If they need to make that stop to prevent, injuries or unsafe to the public, then they could.
But now deputy sheriffs, obviously, they investigate accidents, but they can also write traffic tickets, correct?
Yes,
and they do.
They can. Well, you have full service departments. Douglas County, Carroll County, Floyd County. No, not Floyd County, but Douglas County and Carroll County, let's say, they're full service departments. They have a patrol division and they have traffic units and so forth that does that. Now, DeKalb, Clayton, Fulton, those sheriff's offices only do the constitutional duties that I mentioned. They don't have a patrol division.
Polk County's got a patrol, I believe.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And then you have, like, I think it's Floyd County, you got Cobb County, that have their police departments.
Right.
So the sheriff's department just does those things
just
I mentioned.
The warrants and the jail.
But I get asked all the time. Family members or friends, whatever, say, I had a lady not long ago said, I got a ticket from a Cobb County deputy sheriff, and they can't write tickets. I said, certainly they can. There's a big misconception out there that the deputy sheriffs can't write tickets. Now, I know Cobb County for a time there had a DUI task force, even within the sheriff's department, and they would work closely with the Cobb County Police traffic unit. A lot of these agencies will combine resources and make a special unit to try to tackle a certain problem. But just because a deputy sheriff's out there serving civil papers, whether it be Cobb, Douglas, wherever, he can certainly stop and write a ticket if he feels the need to.
We're going to run out of time, unfortunately. I wanted to get into domestic violence and domestic calls, but unfortunately we're not going to have a whole lot of time for that. If there's one thing in about a minute you could tell our audience that that you'd like for them to really think about when it comes to law enforcement and the role of law enforcement, what would it be?
Well, this is something, Steve, that I say to a lot of people out there. It doesn't matter what profession we do. We always think that we know something about a particular profession that people could do better. We think we know. Think of it as there's a fence, and when you're on this side of the fence, you have a perspective of what law enforcement is and how law enforcement should behave and how law enforcement should set their policies. I've seen so many people think that way, then they get into law enforcement and they work the job every day, and now they realize why things are the way they are. I just ask that the public out there build a relationship with your local law enforcement, get to know what they do, and if you want to get involved in the Citizens Law Enforcement Academy, where you can come spend a few weeks at the Douglas County Sheriff's Office and go through the Citizens Academy, it'll open your eyes. You'll understand things better, and you'll know why things are the way they are.
Joey Garland has been our guest this morning. By the way, your cousin Lee Ivy Sampson does a real nice shout out to you. But is there a way people can contact you if they have any interest or questions?
Sure. You can call the Douglas County Sheriff's Office
and ask for Joey Garland.
Yeah, you can actually go on the Douglas County Sheriff's Office website. You can find my direct number.
All right, well, we hope to have you back because I do want to talk about domestic violence situations. Our guest this morning has been Joey Garland, and he's developing the program called Cop Talk. We'd love to get your input on that. But most of all, we thank you for listening, and we thank Tanner Health System for their sponsorship. You're in tune to WLBB Carrollton.